Hey y'all, welcome back to the community well. It is your host, Anna Iviojo. I'm so excited. Another episode, season 5, episode 3. And y'all gonna get tired of me saying I'm excited to be back because I am, like, really and truly. And I pray that I don't forget this feeling, because being away from y'all, like, I needed that. I so needed that. But also being back feels like this is where I'm supposed to be. And there's no other feeling, like, y'all know that feeling of like, this is where I'm supposed to be. There's no other feeling like that. Anyways, see, I already started rambling, but I'm amped. I am excited for this week's episode. We're going to be talking about chaos and disobedience. And yes, continuation of the life updates. And we're also going to be continuing our conversation about vulnerability, because I feel like it's just so key. Like, it's been key, but I feel like it's so key as we step into our next seasons. It's going to be important for us to be vulnerable with God, be vulnerable with ourselves, and be vulnerable with each other in order to really, like, we haven't tapped into this next level, this next dimension, because we refuse to be vulnerable. And so we're going to be talking about that some more. So, chaos and disobedience. Okay, so y'all know we lived in Georgia for 4 years. So prior to that, for those that don't know me, I shouldn't assume that only, like, people that know me listen to a podcast. Obviously not. We have people from a variety of backgrounds. So my husband and I lived in Boston, Massachusetts. Well, outside of Boston and Stoughton. We always just say Boston. We lived in Boston, Massachusetts, all of our lives. I was born in New York, moved to Massachusetts at around 7 or 8 years old. There's more to that, but we'll just say 7 or 8 years old when my grandmother passed. And then I was in Lawrence forever. And then I moved to Boston for college. Met my husband there, in Boston, and he was there. He moved from Nigeria to Massachusetts when he was 10. So yeah, we were pretty much in Massachusetts all of our lives, right? Aside from the places we were born, we grew up in Massachusetts. So that's all we knew. And then after we got married, we stayed there for a solid, I want to say, 9 years. We were there a long time. So basically, all we had ever known was Massachusetts. All we knew together was Massachusetts. All of our family was in Massachusetts. And then there was a year that, well, when we were in college and we were dating, I applied for Teach for America and wanted to move somewhere else. Oh, and now that I'm sharing this, interestingly enough, Dallas, Texas was on my list back then. I'm going to have to go back in my applications. Complete side note. Welcome to my brain. Side note. Go through the places that I wanted to live in before. Anyways, oh my God. So we wanted to move to Atlanta, Georgia. We wanted to get married and we wanted to move. And God had different plans. So he kept us there for a long period of time. We stayed in the same church for all those 9, 10 years, served as deacons, ministers. And there was one year that I felt like I kept looking at, like, places in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know. And then the following year, I felt called to go to a conference. And after I left that conference in Atlanta, Georgia, I was like, oh, this is crazy. Like, I feel like we're supposed to be moving. And then from that point forward, there was, like, all these signs. And, I share how God speaks to me, but we have to be really intentional to know how God speaks to us. And, like, you may not get license plates like I saw, but we were in Stoughton and I saw Georgia license plates. That's just not a thing that happens. Okay. And then people just, prophetic words and just all these different things. I'll fast forward a little bit through this one because I think there is a longer version of this Massachusetts to Georgia move. Um, anyways, we were obedient. It was a long process. That one felt hard. That leap of faith from Massachusetts to Georgia felt hard because we had small children. At that time, I think prior to us moving, I'm trying to think of the timeline. Prior to us moving, I was already pregnant. So we had two boys and pregnant with a third, taking this leap of faith. And we had no family. We had nothing in Georgia. All we knew was that God said go, and we had to go. And so we went to visit December of 2018. Within 72 hours, God confirmed from the church that we were supposed to go to the city, just everything. And so we made that move in 2019. Now, when we moved in 2019, I mean, everything was set up for us, even like setting up, meeting this woman that was like a godsend so that she could be there to support me with the kids when I gave birth because, my husband would be working. I didn't have family. I mean, everything was set up. Like we knew we had to be in Georgia. And so that was 2019, 2020 pandemic. I mean, even in the midst of the pandemic, what was really hard for me was being away from my family because both my parents got sick. So that was difficult, but I still felt like we needed to be in Georgia, which doesn't make sense to people because they're like, well, your mom is sick, you're this, that, and the other, you should be leaving. In the midst of the pandemic and having a small baby, all of the signs were pointing towards staying in Georgia. And because I did see God come through and heal my mom, that's a whole thing of its own because, she suffered a stroke and everything, and we did see her improve. Needless to say, we moved to Georgia. It didn't make sense to people, and we knew we belonged there. Now, fast forward, I can't recall the exact shift, but something happened where everything in Georgia just started going wrong, and the connections that we had made were falling apart. I mean, you name it, it just felt like a little bit of chaos to the point where even with like neighbors, we were having issues with neighbors, and like, I'm a nice person. I'm a good neighbor. I mind my business and I just want people to respect me and I respect you. I mean, I'm not like the best neighbor. Like, don't come to my house all the time. Like, not that type of neighbor. Not even gonna lie. My home is my sanctuary, so I don't play that. But it felt really chaotic. Like it was something that I really can't put into words. I can't articulate, but everything that could go wrong was going wrong, from like even like the kids teams. Like one of the kids sports teams was really toxic. um Things in school, there were some things that were settled, right? Like, thank God, like Gianna's school was like the biggest blessing. Her teachers were amazing, things like that. There was little things, one of my sons was thriving, like in his school setting. Like there was just little things that you were like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why is that, like, the community not gelling? Like, why are we not gelling with these people, and why are we not making connections? And we would meet people, we met amazing people. So it was this really hard place of, we did meet amazing, amazing people. And we make a lot of our connections through our kids because, that just is what it is. So like football parents and like, meeting people that were just so amazing and kind-hearted. And then, meeting some of the kids' classmates' parents that we really connected with. And like we had, I had a friend of mine, my girl, she's really like family. Who lived 10 minutes away from me. And so that was amazing. But it was like these pockets of people, but it wasn't like a solid support system like we had back in Massachusetts. And it's hard to explain. But those times in your life where nothing makes sense and every door is closed and everything feels like chaotic and you're like, what is happening? And it was the shift that we had to move. And we were in denial. The place that we were renting at that time, the landlord was like, so we're selling the house and y'all need to move. And I knew God had already told me that she was going to tell us that. And I was like, okay. And we were adamant about staying because at that point we had made a big leap. We have kids that they feel like they have some community, and it's really, really hard when you have kids to just make these transitions. And I want to talk about that because people just see the big moves. Oh, y'all just moved to Georgia. Oh, y'all just moved to Texas. But it's hard. Those decisions are hard. Listen, there's no, and I will say it, obedience is key. Obedience isn't easy though, you know? So we spent a year in Georgia when we should have left. And that was the hardest year of my life because, like I was telling y'all, not only was I grieving my mom at that time, by that time we had the hardest year we have had ever. And my husband and I have been through some stuff. We've been together for 15 years and we've been through some stuff. And yeah, y'all, it was like I can't even explain it. Like from calling cops on neighbors, like it was chaotic. It was really chaotic. And it was chaos because we were being disobedient, you know? And so then at that point, we had to pray about what we had to do and what was next. And I remember fasting and praying with my friends. And from the very next day until we moved, I saw a Texas license plate every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. And now I don't doubt when God speaks to me. That's not true. I do sometimes. Let's not, because I was very vulnerable in the previous episode about God telling me that my mom was gonna pass and me doubting myself. So let's not get it twisted. There's some things that when God says certain things, when God says certain things, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's God. You know, there are some other things that we're working on, the harder things, like people passing, that has been difficult in the past. When he shares difficult things, I'm like, oh, really? You know, and so I mean I feel like that's how it is with a lot of people. Sometimes they want to believe that the good things is easier to believe that it's God. Oh, God wants you to buy a car. Oh, amen. God wants you to buy a car. You know, God, he's gonna pay for it. The harder things, I need you to leave and where you're at. And you're like, but God, I'm making so much money and this is amazing. I need you to leave. You know, so anyways, I just think it's easier to believe the good things when God tells us than it is to believe the harder things and the ones that make us have to make harder decisions. Because when we make the hard decisions, people don't see, oh, that's God, especially unbelievers. They just see you making a hard decision. And if you're a people pleaser and you care what other people think, then it's really, really, really hard because you're going to care what people think and you don't want to let people down. So I saw these license plates, and my husband's a very logical man, and he says it himself. He's like, he needs a plan. He needs answers and plans. And so, you know, his faith is different than mine. And it's a very interesting dynamic. But I was like, you know, we need to pray on this, and this is what we need to do. And, you know, I know he looks at me sometimes and he's like, ma'am, what? But we also were like, we have to do this, especially because of the way things were panning out. Like, we just had to. And sometimes it's not like, oh, pick up your family and go to Texas. Where in Texas? And for me, I'm like, if you see the sign and you hear God, take one step. And so for us, that step was visiting Texas, pick a place. It just made sense to go to Houston. We have family in Houston, and oh my God, it'd be amazing to be in Houston with family. So we went to Houston for a weekend. The place itself, being with family, amazing. Houston, I don't know what part of Houston, I shouldn't talk smack, but just where we went, because it wasn't for us, the good parts were hidden. God will do that sometimes. he'll show you the things he wants to show you, right? Because I'm sure there's places in Houston that are amazing, but we couldn't see ourselves where we went to visit. We could not see ourselves. And we were so disappointed because we drove, I mean, I think it's 13 hours with 3 kids, like 13 hours. It's like, and it's no joke, especially with a toddler. Honey, 13 hours with a toddler. Yeah. Amen. Okay. So we were really disappointed because, and I also remember I couldn't move. I was really struggling in that season. I had like the sciatica pain and I could barely walk for like a month. So now imagine me in that much pain, driving 13 hours. My husband was driving. He doesn't let me drive. But like he also likes it. So I was like, whatever. So he's driving. I'm in pain. And I mean, I could barely walk. I could barely like move, sit, everything hurt. And so it was a huge sacrifice to do that. Um, and so we were disappointed. We went back to Georgia and we're like, this sucks because, X, Y, and Z. So now then at that point, I'm like looking for jobs and um, I won't talk about this next part too much just because there's more to unpack and I'll probably share at a different time. But I applied to jobs in Dallas, and it was all God that God did use a job to move us to Texas because you know it just made sense. Um, and so we came to visit. We had 36 hours, and when I tell you in 36 hours in Dallas, Texas, God was like. And I remember writing in my journal, I said, I pray this trip. And then this particular trip, it was only my husband and I and baby girl because we left the boys. The boys had their activities and it just felt like a lot. As much as we want to take them on the faith journey, it can be a lot to you guys want to, at that point that we didn't share that we wanted to move to Texas, obviously, but they were like, y'all going to Texas again? Like, what is happening? So we left them with my girl. Thank God for our people. We didn't have a huge village, like I told y'all, but the people that we do have, man, rock solid MVPs. Love, 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 love my people. So we left them. The husband and I and Gigi girl went to Dallas, and I came to Dallas for 36 hours because we didn't even have that much time. We had to like leave on a Friday. We had all of Saturday, and then we had to drive back. Was it late Saturday or I think it was late Saturday, early Sunday? Child, we had not a lot of time. And in that moment, I remember going back to my journal entry saying, like, I really pray that this trip confirms something or reveals something. And I remember hearing God say, it will, because this is where you belong. And indeed, Dallas was such a good trip. It was different than Houston, and it just felt like where we needed to be. Um, and so then we went back to Georgia and continued to pray. And it was crazy though, because we didn't have a place to live until like we didn't sign our lease until I want to say days before moving. So it's like these stretches of faith that but all he needs is the little seed. You don't need that much. And we believed that God was going to lead us to a place, a new place, a new place of abundance, a new place of just wherever he wanted us to be. And we sold everything and it's hard, right? It's like we sold a lot of things, and so buying new furniture and stuff like that. But the way I explained it to my husband and the way I explained it to a friend of ours and I explained it to the boys is in two different ways. If you were in the armed forces and you were called to move, your military wife or military kids, you pick up and go, because that is your job, right? And you're that family. You pick up and go. If you're in the NFL, if you're in the NBA, whatever it is, and I sort of asked my husband before I recorded, you get drafted, whatever, you get switched, whatever the terminology is, if you get switched, if you get oh shish kebabers, if you're called to a different team, you're going to move, right? You'll have a home. I know I follow this football player and his wife on TikTok. I love them. And like they have a home in like California, but they've been on different teams because he's on the practice squad here. And then they, and he'll get released and like go somewhere else and like, has to move and like they rent places and they go wherever they need to go for their team, is what I'm saying. Right. And we are on the team, on Jesus Christ's team. Okay. We are warriors for God's army. Wherever God calls us, that's where we're going to go. Period. So is that example of the fact that this is the army that we're a part of. And wherever God tells us to go, that's where we're going to go. You have an assignment. When you've completed that, boom, and he calls you somewhere else. Now I am praying, God, that you keep us in Texas for a while. Because it is very hard moving and making connections, and for our kids and everything like that, it is very difficult. And it's also, let's say you're not even a believer and you're listening to this, you're not a tree, dude. You're not planted anywhere. Like you can pick up and go. God forbid, wherever you go doesn't work out, go back. Go back to wherever. Like if you're in your hometown and you're like, I really want to move. Go somewhere else for 3-6 months, whatever it is, and move. We're so conditioned to like, and I wholeheartedly believe in loyalty and all that, but staying at a job 25, 30 years and you're miserable, staying in a house and you're miserable, staying in a city, in a town, and we don't need to live like that. We don't need to live like that. If we're believers, we need to believe that God is going to be with us no matter where we go. He's not just in Massachusetts. He's not just in Georgia. So wherever he calls you to, he's going to provide and he's going to make a way. And if you know for a fact you're supposed to be moving, I'm just saying be obedient, because there's so much chaos and disobedience. And not only when it comes to a move, when it comes to other things, you're miserable at your job and things are going wrong and things are going to get much worse before they get better because you don't belong there and it's time to go. And it's happened to me on multiple occasions. So I'm speaking from experience, okay? Because I am one to give people chances to try. Like I do have a very background of resiliency, right? Like I've been through really hard things in my life and I'm always like, maybe I just need to try harder. Maybe I just need to grind this out and grit and all of this. And it's really just God being like, girl, you don't belong there. And you do need to have discernment of like, are there some hard challenges or some hard things, that I need to experience, that I need to go through, that I need to grow through? Or is this something I need to let go of, right? Relationships, stuff like that. The only one I'm not preaching this about is like marriage, because unless, there's infidelity and abuse and all that, like there are some things that we need to grow through. I'm gonna leave that one alone because I know that one's sensitive, that one's deep, but we need to have discernment about the things that we need to grow through, the things that we need to let go of. What are we holding on to and why? What part of us is telling us to stay so deep in something that we know we should have left a long time ago? So here we are from Massachusetts to Georgia, from Georgia, now in Texas. And Texas feels good in the sense that I know this is where God wants us. I know that this is where we belong right now. I know that this is where God is going to use us. And although it is hard, right? The challenges we're experiencing now is just meeting new people. I find myself challenged by having to make connections with people and kind of like almost reintroduce myself, especially in this season, because I am going through grief, but I just went through this hard period of grief, and grief changes you. Grief changes you in a way that I can't even explain. And so I feel like I'm relearning myself. And so while I'm relearning myself, I also have to almost reset boundaries and expectations and relationships. And what I mean by that is some people are, this is a really simple example. People love themselves a phone. I do not like talking on the phone. I do not like talking on the phone. I love talking, right? And I love talking to my friends. I do make time for my friends, but I'm a very in-person type of person. I try very hard to be present where I am. And that's extremely, extremely hard when you have 3 kids, right? And you're a person of connection, because I do like making connections with my people, but I don't like the chaotic feeling of being on the phone and then yelling at the kids to do this, yelling at the kids to do that. Yeah, stop this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm not being present with my kids, and I'm not being present with the person on the phone. And it's not always perfect. I do imperfect, and I do it whenever I have to. Like, I do talk to my friends, and there's specific friends that I do talk to, and the kids are going crazy and they know I'm talking to auntie or whatever, because for some reason you get on the phone and these kids all of a sudden want everything. I'm like, y'all weren't even near me. Anyways, like, what? Not, yeah. So, so I do imperfect and I do messes and chaos because I have my people that I can do that with. But I'm not the type of person that's like on the phone. Like, I'm going to the store, I'm on the phone. I'm going this way, I'm on the phone, and I'm blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't like that. Right. And there's people that don't know that about you. And so you have to like reintroduce that and reset those things. And I'm just like very comfortable with the people I already know that know me, and I don't have to do that. But alas, we want to make connections. I remember God telling me, I saw it in one of my devotions. It's like, you want community, but you want community on an island. You don't want to make the effort of like connecting with people. Oh, I have social anxiety, I'm not going to go out. Like, you think the people are just going to come to your house? You want to grow in deeper connection with them, but you don't want to have the little conversations. I don't like basic conversations. I like deep conversations. Let's get in there. But you have to build up to that. You have to build up into having the little, do you like tacos? No, you don't like tacos? You like Chinese food? Okay. It's like building up and building a relationship to get to the part of community. And, and so I'm growing in that. And that's me being vulnerable and being transparent, because as we're building our community, also knowing and understanding that I'm doing this and saying this, not because I'm an expert, not because I'm a pro, not because I'm the best at it, because I'm growing in it in real life and growing in it with you all. So yeah, so it's a whole thing. And I think that's why it's important for me to be vulnerable, because that's how we get to that aspect of community. I want to have real and genuine relationships. I want us to have genuine relationships. And I think that how we do it is a vulnerability, because, I can pretend and fake the funk of being someone that I'm not, right? So that people can like me. And, I pick up the phone all the time and like, this, that, and the other, so that you can like me, but that's not being really me. And so then that's not being rooted in, it's not being rooted in authenticity and vulnerability. And so, many times we fear rejection when it comes to being vulnerable, because if I don't pick up the phone, or if I don't do whatever you want me to do, or if I don't, go along with whatever you're saying, I fear that you're not going to like the boundaries that I'm setting. And I fear that you're not going to like me for me. You're not going to like all of me and all of my boundaries, or you're not going to, or you're going to think I'm too much. Or, if I just go along with what you're saying, then you think I'm easygoing and cool. But if I don't agree with what you're saying, because I feel really strongly about this, we might actually get into a disagreement, and we might actually, you know, you may actually not call me over to hang out again. And it's that part of like, there's the two pieces, right? There's a piece of me, of me doing the work within myself, right? Like we have to do the work within ourselves so that we are comfortable with who we are, that we know who we are, that we know our own boundaries before we even communicate them and why we're setting them. And are we setting boundaries or are we setting walls, right? Because boundaries allow good things in and keep bad things out, whereas walls doesn't allow for anything at all. And that's important to do that reflection on your own and assess what you're doing and where it's coming from, right? And then being able to show up as who we are and who we want to be, who we're growing to be, because there's also for some people growing and knowing that I'm fighting the words, guys. I'm thinking and processing this out loud. But it for some of us, we are not fully the person that we want to be. Like there's I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, and that keeps coming up, which is why I keep mentioning it. But like the people pleasers, you know, that it's this automatic response to be a people pleaser. So you have to be more intentional about doing the self-reflection and doing that time and having that time by yourself so that you get to know yourself, so that you're like, okay, I'm going to be intentional about speaking up and not going along with everything you're saying, and about, you know, saying no, which is a huge one. So it takes a little bit more work to do those two different things, and to then be open and honest in these relationships, even if you fear being rejected. Like, you know what? I know you probably want me to say yes. And you know what? There's a part of me that wants to say yes because I just want to go along with this, but I don't really feel like doing that. You know, and also knowing and assessing beforehand who you can be vulnerable with, because there's some people that will take advantage of it, right? So I'm not saying go out there and everybody deserves a full-blown sharing of why you're being vulnerable and all these things. Assess first who deserves that and who is worthy, and put them where they need to go, right? Because if some people don't deserve you being vulnerable, then you don't need to have that level of relationship. You can just be cordial with them, right? So it's important that we take the time to assess, you know, who we want in our community, at what level we want them, who are going to be in the core of the people that we're going to be doing that work with, right? There's my core people that know the deep work that I'm doing right now, the deep issues that I'm struggling with, and who I'm going to allow in, right? Vulnerability is inviting people in to walk alongside you to do the hard work. And who are people that, you know, they can be in the outer circles, and that's okay. But knowing that if we want to tap in and go to a different level, that we need to be vulnerable, and we need to be vulnerable with God, ourselves, and each other in the sense that they're the people that we're selecting, not just any old body, you know what I mean? And yeah, I think I covered a lot. And I think that it's important to, I'll leave y'all with this. You know, if you fear being rejected by others, and you fear like what people will see when you're vulnerable, most times being vulnerable, it just exposes a lot, and there is a risk, but there's a huge benefit. Also, when you want that deep community, you see others having it, it's because they took the courage, they took a step of courage to be vulnerable. And so when you have the facade of being okay and not sharing and whatever it is, what are you protecting? What are you concealing? What are you afraid of people seeing when you open it up and you expose yourself? Like, what do you really fear? What is your biggest fear around that? What are you protecting? and taking some time to reflect who are the people, at least 2 to 3 people that you can be really open and honest with and vulnerable. Allow people in, invite them in to walk this thing out with you so that you can reach that next level, whatever that next level is for you, with personal growth, career, anything. So that you can reach the next level, you need to be vulnerable, transparent, open, and honest, starting with yourself and maybe journaling. I'll talk more about different types of journaling because I know people kind of like shy away from journaling, but there's so many different ways to journal, and it's so powerful, taking the time to reflect and be with your thoughts. But yes, y'all, I'm excited for what's next. I'm excited for these different conversations that are going to take us deeper. We're going to grow. We're going to grow through this, and this is where we tap in so that we can survive, so we can thrive. So we can thrive as individuals and as a community, and not just survive, because we're here to live this life in full, y'all. All right, y'all. So that's it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week. If you could really quick like and subscribe on YouTube, and if you could 5-star us, share with the people, share on your social media platforms, I would really appreciate it so that we can grow together. I love y'all. See you next week.